Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the first of our lecture series, luncheon lecture series. We hope to see many of you 4 more times at the luncheons. Come to all that you can because I don't think you'll want to miss any of them if possible. I'm very happy to have such a wonderful group here to hear our speaker, and I'm now going to introduce Josephine Dunn, art historian from the University of Scranton, who will introduce our speaker. Dr. Dunn.
It'll be a rather different kind of introduction. Once upon a time, not so long ago, history and philosophy lived in adjoining castles. The historians spent the day studying paper documents. The philosophers, though not all of them, spent their day studying paint and stone. Often, the two disciplines would regard one another from their turret. Sometimes they even sparred on the meadow that separated them. Sometimes history won the day. Other times, philosophy carried the pennant of victory. But one night, when a beguiling moon was swimming in the sky and a nightingale sang, history and philosophy mated. Months later, there was fruit of the union, a hybrid child that was neither historian nor philosopher exactly. Neither parent stepped forward to own the child because it was not entirely a historian nor completely a philosopher. So the hybrid child went her way, taking the best aspects of her parents with her. She took with her the ability to study paper documents, as well as the ability to study paint and stone. She became expert at both. This orphan child is art history. Today, the University of Scranton is only one of 2 universities in the United States where the disciplines of history and art history are wed in one department. Yes, history has stepped forward and recognized the history in his child. Today on the University of Scranton campus, historians and art historians not only work alongside one another, but they study and learn from each other as well. And this afternoon, Judith Shendar of Yad Vashem in Israel will show us just how this marriage between history and art history is affected. She will show us the history in art. Please join me in welcoming her to our campus.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start this lecture with a thank you note to Sandra Myers, who has invited me to come here and give my presentation as part of the Schemel lecture series. And I would like to add a personal note. Coming to Scranton is really special for me, as my parents lived in this city for 17 years. My mother passing away this past January, I would like to dedicate this lecture to the memory of both my parents, Tzvi and Inga Ayalon, who resided up on Webster Street, about a block away from Sandra. And actually, this is the kernel of Sandra and my relationship, which has spanned now 4 decades, Sandra. And I think Sandra has watched me grow from an art history student to where I am today. And we sort of each meet on different parts of this globe. As you know, Sandra is a globetrotter, and I try to be behind her. And I believe my presentation today which so nicely was introduced by Jody, is really to tell a story of a curator that joined historians and was not that welcomed on the first note. I was invited to be on board of the curators who put together on our new premise the new Holocaust History Museum at Yad Vashem. The first one was designed in the early 70s, and we opened the new one in 2005. Well, there were a bunch of historians there, renowned and less renowned, and I was introduced as the art historian. Several eyebrows were raised. What's an art historian doing amongst us? We are going to have a historical narrative. And artsy things are very nice at an art museum. What are they supposed to do at a serious historical narrative of a Holocaust history museum? I say that at the end, I was triumphant, or rather, the artists were triumphant. Because at the end of the road, the historians used to run after me and say, Judith, Judith, what do you have in your collection that can fit my research at the moment? And at the end, some 270 works of art are intertwined into the historical narrative and teach us an important lesson, that artists are the sensitive ones. They do have some premonitions that others don't, and we do get through them a very personal view of the Holocaust, which differs, but on the other hand, gives us a wonderful opening into the world of one individual during that time. Unfortunately, many of the artists I'm going to introduce to you ended their life in the gas chambers of Auschwitz, which is the loss not only to us Jewish people, but to the world. I think we have lost some wonderful artists, as we have lost some other personalities. But what we realized is, and we do know, if we talk about 6 million Jews who were murdered during that period, that's an anonymous number. By telling you some annals of artists, you are going to experience the Holocaust through a personal story of several people that were also artists, were persons, and by remembering them, their names, and their endeavors, I think it's the most wonderful way to have a memorial. A memorial to artists is still speaking and dealing, and yes, enjoying the art, because the enjoyment of art did not cease with them being murdered. So we'll start with my presentation. Yad Vashem premise opened in 2005 with a building. Can you see the image? Did you turn off the lights? Yeah? Is that as dark as it gets? If I move it backwards? Any better? Yeah. I think it's better. No, there's no. Okay, I apologize. Yes, yes. This is the entrance to the new museum. Actually, it's a cantilevered prism which is dissecting the mountain of remembrance from one end to the other. Actually, it's a non-building, because all you see is this cantilevered part on one end, then it goes into the mountain. The only protruding part are the upper part, which lets the light come into the building, and at the end, we'll see it later, it comes on the other side. We purposely asked our architects when they presented their plans for our tender to have an underground building feeling, and non-building is the right way to deal with the Holocaust. Because what kind of a building are you going to build which is supposed to represent destruction? And thus a non-building was our solution. When we started to work on our curatorial program, we all knew that no one can understand the annals of the Holocaust without knowing that there was a thriving community, a Jewish community in Europe. Oh, we had discussions galore. I would say they went on for months and months of what kind of a display should we have to be the springboard for our patrons to enter our museum. And at the end of the process, I said, I think I have an idea. Why don't we turn to artists? Their creativity might give us just the right solution for this space, which is very small in size, but needs to have an impact. And here's the solution. And now I will need some savvy way of doing this. You will excuse me for a moment. Okay. Why don't I get...
You ready for your power?
We'll minimize this, right?
Okay. Which one do you want to go with?
The first one, which is...
Is that the right one?
I double-clicked on
So
it.
you have it open right there.
Right there.
Is that the right one?
Now we need to do this, right?
Right, the first one. Okay.
Okay. Why is no sound? No sound. We lost the sound. Technology. You did disconnect. Okay. We turned to several Israeli artists eventually, commissioning the artist by the name of Michal Rovner. By now, she is a world-renowned video artist. And I want you to watch it for a little while, and then I'll speak about it. The name of the presentation is A Living Landscape. The creative work of Michal Rovner interweaves living surroundings and everyday moments, setting out a mosaic of the landscape of Jewish world that was lost. The work is based on archival film footage and original photography from many places where Jews lived at the beginning of the 20th century. The soundtrack combines original recordings from the period and a musical motif from a composition by Philip Glass. I believe this work to be very feminine in nature, because what Michal Rovner did is like a patchwork, taking different pieces from original footage and sewing them together to a new entity, just like patchwork of women do, taking old material and having at the end this wonderful quilt, which is sometimes even more beautiful than the original pieces. And what you see here and listen to is the vibrating lives and sounds of Jewish life in Europe between two world wars. None of the images that you see are really from one place. It's a mosaic made of pieces that could come from different parts of Europe, but as she called it, it's a living landscape. She took the map of Europe and embedded it with the living images and the living sounds of Jews who lived there prior to World War II. Now you will have to excuse me for having to stop this just because time doesn't allow me to show you the entire piece. And now I'm looking for my, okay, we'll get there. We still are grateful to technology, which allows me to bring this, just to tell you the size of this visual presentation is 30 feet high. So when you enter the museum, this is the first sight and sound you see. And then you turn your back on that, and while continuing to go through the main artery of the museum, under this prism, for a while, you still keep hearing the voices. And along the way you go, they fade away, as in reality, Jewish presence faded away. My next stop at our short visit of Yad Vashem has to do with the rise to power of the Nazi Party. On January 30th, 1933, Hitler was appointed chancellor, marking a new era in Germany and Europe. Germany's defeat in World War I and the economic, social, and political crisis facing the country helped strengthen the Nazi Party. In 1932 election, it became the largest party in the Reichstag, and the resulting political circumstances led President Hindenburg to appoint Adolf Hitler chancellor. Within a short time, Hitler dismantled all the democratic processes in Germany and installed a totalitarian, racist, and anti-Semitic regime. The huge photograph you see in front of you is a rally at a Nazi Party convention in a stadium in Nuremberg, Germany, on September 1933. What we try to embed in this part of the museum is to show not only how forceful was totalitarian regime as far as the conduct, but how they enlisted the arts to become a part of how you influence a people to rally behind Hitler. By now we have a word for it, fascist arts. But we didn't have a name for it before. And the very bold colors of black and red, which are so forceful, are all of the ones who have shown law and order exists not only on the streets, but only in the arts. And thus a totalitarian regime enlists art as an agent, as part of its ideology. And unfortunately, this ideology of the rise of the Nazi Party had a lot to do with anti-Semitism. Nazi ideology was based on modern racist anti-Semitism. It saw the Jews as parasitic and anti-human biological element imbued with destructive satanic powers against whom a war of destruction had to be waged. Nazi ideology saw the Jews as a race that throughout history deformed the natural order of the world. In contrast, the Aryans stood as superior race destined to restore order. With the Nazi rise to power, a racist anti-Semitism became a political program that enlisted all the resources of the German nation for its implementation. Well, we were sitting, historians and curators, and deciding how this section of the museum is going to look like. And while sitting with this distinguished group, I said, you know what? I have the best solution for you. Looked at me, what can the curator come up with? And I said, there is one Jewish artist who has recorded everything on paper, not in words, but with images. Okay, who she is she? I came up and showed them a very fantastic depiction. By the way, just to show you, on the very bottom, there is a little painting. I will come up with it now in larger size. This is the story of Charlotte Salomon. And I would like to share with you some of her annals, because as I said, knowing a story is knowing one person. Salomon was born on April 16, 1917, as the only daughter of Dr. Albert Salomon, a renowned surgeon in Berlin, and his wife, Franziska, assimilated Jewish Berliners. When she was 9, her mother committed suicide. But this fact was kept away from her. 4 years later, her father remarried his bride, Paula Lindberg, who actually was Paula Levy, but being a Paula Levy and being an opera singer was not a good name, so she changed it to Lindberg, of all names. As well, a well-known opera singer. In 1933, with the rise of the Nazi regime, Charlotte refused to go to school and be subject to humiliations heaped on the Jewish students. Nonetheless, in 1935, she was admitted to the State Academy of Fine Arts in Berlin. During the course of her studies, she was awarded the Academy Prize, but for racial reasons, the prize was revoked. With the worsening of the situation in Germany, her father decided, of being incarcerated in Sachsenhausen, to send his daughter to southern France. That's where her grandparents, the Grünwalds, already lived in a beautiful villa in a small village by the name of Villefranche, and the villa was owned by a very eccentric American alcoholist. Yes, she liked to drink, but she was quite a fantastic woman. Her name was Atli Moore. And in that villa, unfortunately, Charlotte has experienced the suicide of her grandmother. Her grandfather was already in his early 80s, died of old age. And one day, Charlotte found herself all by herself in southern France. It's 1941. Yes, it's supposed to be the free zone of France under Vichy control. Well, it wasn't. There were Jewish laws there too. And she wanders back into the villa where she meets a Romanian Jew who was living there as the state manager and sometimes lover of Atli and the buddy for drinking. He's in his 40s and she is 24 years old. Well, they're both lonely and they meet each other and they fall in love. And Charlotte becomes pregnant. What's a nice Jewish boy doing when he gets a girl pregnant? You've got to marry her. So they go to City Hall in Nice and they register for marriage. The person at the Nice municipality did know Alexander Nagler, and he said, "You want to marry Charlotte Salomon? She's registered as a Jew." I said, "Yes, I do. I'm Jewish too." So they married and they go back to the estate. But unfortunately, in 1943, there comes to town a very avid seeker of the last Jews still in Europe by the name of Brunner. And they knock at the door of the villa. Guess what? Everything was written in City Hall. They didn't have to search wide and afar. And we have a very grappling video of the gardener of the estate and of his wife telling about the day that the Gestapo knocked at the door and dragged Charlotte by hair. She was by that time 5 months pregnant. They are both transferred to Drancy on the outskirts of Paris, and from there to Auschwitz. Charlotte didn't see the day after. Pregnant Jewish women don't have the right to live. Alexander lasted for another couple of months and perished of what is written as heart failure, but as you can imagine, of hunger, starvation, and forced labor. While she was in southern France and very depressed, the physician of the village by the name of Mordi told her, you know what, Charlotte, you used to go to art school. Why don't you put down your annals? And within a frenzy of 3 months, she painted 1,300 pages, recollecting her own experiences. And one of the pages, as you see, it says, January 1st, 1933. You tell me of a better image of what it means when the Wehrmacht is marching the streets of Berlin, of Charlottenburg, where Charlotte was living, filling the space from one edge to the other. Look at the soaring swastika over these soldiers. And if you could see closely, you know what? Each one of the soldiers has a very small mustache about his upper lip. Yes. They are all small Hitlers. She was afraid of them, and she knew why, and she's not that much in retrospect when she does it. She is still under the spell of the Nazis, in spite of being in this beautiful, beautiful small village of Villefranche. So on the left side, you can see the image of Charlottenburg. She named this series Life or Theater, ? And I say, neither life nor theater. It was death all over, but she was still imagining her life as a piece of theater. When I told my fellow curators that I have the best story for them, I wasn't just imagining it, because every piece they said historically correct, I could say Charlotte painted it, because she painted the annals of her own family. And that's what you have in front of you, is her father, Surgeon Albert Salomon, sitting like this, and above him, it shows with a big red X. He cannot practice anymore being a surgeon. On the left side, we have, unfortunately it's a little bit dark, we have Paula Solomon standing on stage singing the opera, and the crowd is shouting at the side, Aus, raus. You get out of here, Jewess. We cannot contaminate our Aryan ears with you Jews singing to us. So the laws in Germany very quickly were the ones that did not allow Jews to perform any kind of civil service. They were thrown out from their profession, and thus Solomon is just showing us what happens to one family, but it's a paradigm to what happened to Jewish population. Well, things worsened for the Jewish populations. There was the boycott regime. Nobody was allowed to buy with Jews. You couldn't practice law. You couldn't practice medicine. You couldn't go to high school. My own mother, who came from Germany at the age of 16, was thrown out of high school studies because Jews was not allowed to attend high schools anymore. I would like to read you something that a German Jew wrote. He was about to embark and leave for Palestine. It's 1936. This was my farewell from everything German, my internal farewell from what had been my fatherland. I buried 43 years of my life. I could no longer be German. I went to the graves of my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and I spoke to them. I gave back to them everything German that I had received for 3 generations. I shouted at their graves, "You were wrong. I too was misled." So the next stage for German Jews after Kristallnacht, November 1938, was the final call to tell them that if you ever thought things are going to be better, they sure were not. There was one solution then: emigrate, emigrate, emigrate. Try to find a country that would receive you. Well, the Jews found themselves at the time being foreigners in their own country, and at the same time, the world was closed to the Jews. The problem of refugees from Germany and Austria increased the pressure on the American government to change its immigration policy. President Roosevelt initiated an international conference in Amiens, France, in July of 1938 to address the problem. It was made clear in advance to the 32 participating countries that they would not be expected to change their immigration policies. Indeed, aside from the Dominican Republic, the participating countries displayed an unwillingness to admit Jewish refugees. I would like to tell you what the Australian delegate to the Amiens conference said. Under these circumstances, Australia cannot do more. As we have no real racial problem, we are not serious to importing one. So after Kristallnacht, the question was where to. The Jewish emigration from Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia quickened. Entrance to most countries was forbidden, forcing desperate Jews to seek out any possible destination. Until August of 1939, Shanghai, China, was the only place in the world that did not require a visa, and thousands of Jews emigrated there. Meanwhile, Jewish refugees continued trying to obtain visas for Latin American countries, the known story about the St. Louis, docking in Cuba, not allowing its 400 Jews to come down, coming up to Florida, in Miami, Americans not allowing the Jews to come down, and the ship that embarked from Hamburg went all the way back to Hamburg, to Europe. Most of those who were on board eventually perished during the Holocaust. Israel was closed as the Jewish mandate. The British mandate was there. Jews couldn't go to Palestine either. I think we need to mention the Brits. They were willing to take 10,000 children under the age of 13 under what was called their Kindertransport. And they saved 10,000 Jewish children. Most of the parents perished, but the kids did survive. I would like to quote what Chaim Weizmann was at that time the president of the World Jewish Zionist Committee in Europe said, "There are in this part of the world, East and Central Europe, 6 million Jews for whom the world is divided into places where they cannot live and places where they cannot enter." The lethal catch-22 of the Jews in 1938-39. As always, artists do understand what's happening around them. The next artist is again a German artist by the name of Felix Nussbaum. I'm so sorry about this, you know. I'm not really able to show you the beauty of these works of art. Well, what we have is a Jew with his little bundle next to him, sitting at a huge table. Its perspective is much larger than what it'd be in real reality, somewhat surrealistic. And on that table stands a big globe. And the Jew sits on his chair doing this. Because in spite of the globe being big, round, and many countries on it, he is in that catch-22. There's nowhere to go. No country is opening its doors. The room he sits in looks very much like a cell, but it's not really a prison, because on the right side, there is an opening. And if we look through the opening, there is a tree, and the tree has no leaves, and there are black ravens that fly over the tree. Well, Nussbaum, it's the very beginning. He did this painting in 1940. He was incarcerated. I should tell you a little bit about his life story. Born in Germany in a small town by the name Osnabrück, he was a very accomplished student at the Berlin Academy. At the time headed by Max Liebermann, who was a Jew hailed as the most important Jewish artist until 1933 came and all his paintings came down off all the museum's walls in Germany. He won a scholarship to go to the Massimo Villa in Rome. Comes 1933, he is with the most accomplished art students in Rome, and there comes Goebbels. And Goebbels gives a wonderful speech of what the role of art is going to be within Nazi Germany. And Nussbaum knew that there's no room for him there as a Jew. He didn't have to wait long. He was expelled from his school the day after, and he vowed never to go back to Germany until the Nazi regime is toppled. Well, by now he was a refugee by choice, looking for a place he could reside in, and finally finding Brussels as his hometown. He had the Belgian passport, but it had a big J on it. Everybody knew he was Jewish. And when the Germans came in May of 1940, foreigners, non-citizens of Belgium, were the first one to be called in. And he was transported to southern France to a camp by the name of Gurs. He was able to flee, go back to Brussels, and in hiding produce hundreds of wonderful paintings. He was a universalist. He wanted to be the best German painter. But once he was expelled from that society, he went back to his Jewish roots, and in a most interesting manner, surrealist and symbolist by nature, he recounted his annals. And one of these paintings is the one you see here, which was exactly what he was facing. Where can I go? Unfortunately, in his hiding, he was informed, and on the last transport from Belgium to Auschwitz in the year October 1944, he and his wife Felka, she was an artist as well, arrived at the platform of Auschwitz. Well, Mengele didn't think they were worthy to see the next day, and both of them were marched to the gas chambers on the very same day. Lucky enough, we have their paintings, and they recollect the history, again, not just of Felix Nussbaum, but part of the annals of the Holocaust. Why isn't it moving? Here we go. Well, the next painting is again Charlotte Salomon. This is her farewell from Germany when she goes out to southern France. And it's very interesting because in her work, there are two kinds of blues. One is the Monday blues, the blues were desperation deals. She didn't want to leave Germany. Germany was her home. So on the platform of the train station, her parents say goodbye to her. But I would like to read you something she wrote, because besides being this wonderful visual artist, she had a way with words as well. The one sentence was, "The war raged on, and I sat by the sea and saw deep into the heart of humankind." Did she really see the heart of humankind? Probably not the humankind which murdered her. And then she wrote, "And with a dream awakened eyes, she saw all the beauty around her, saw the sea, felt the sun, and knew she had to vanish for a while from the human plane and make every sacrifice in order to create her world anew out of depths." I hope I can create anew some of the depths of Charlotte Salomon by just telling you about her, seeing her work, and hopefully you're going to see, there's a wonderful book about her work, and I encourage you to go and look at it, because her personal saga of 1,300 pages will tell you about the terminal life of a 26 years old Jewish girl. I'm going to show you something which probably the most unlikely image you would think I would show you, which deals with the Holocaust, because you can see Mickey Mouse there. Actually, what it says on the cover stage, it says like this: Mickey Mouse, U Camp de Gure, and then it says, publie sans autorisation de Walt Disney, which means Walt Disney didn't authorize this piece of art, and Horst Rosenthal was well aware, how harsh the laws are. Well, Horst Rosenthal was another Jew. He born August 19, 1915 in Germany. In 1942, he was arrested in Paris, sent to Gurs, where he made this little booklet. Unfortunately, Rosenthal too was sent to Auschwitz through Drancy on transport number 31 on September 11, 1942, and was murdered upon arrival. Unfortunately, we have no additional information about him. Oh, artists, they are so smart and know how to tell us stories in a such manner that I don't think anyone else could. Now we are 1940, Gurs. What does a Jewish inmate do in his free time? He draws us a little booklet about Mickey Mouse. and here are the annals of Mickey Mouse at Gurs. One day, during year 2 of the National Revolution, I was walking peacefully somewhere in France. My heart was full of joy because my baker had given me 1,002 grams of bread for 1,000 grams of ration tickets. Life is wonderful. Suddenly, though, a policeman stopped me. He said. It was Basque. Since I don't understand a word of that language, I didn't answer him. Son of a bitch, your papers. My papers? I've never had any papers. Me? No papers. Me? International. Oh, you're a foreigner. That settles the case. Come on to headquarters with you. And that's how I got to Gurs. My first impression was rather poor. This is the middle one. As far as the eye could see, hundreds of little dog kennels in a row, with people swarming between them, bent on mysterious tasks. But they didn't have time to look closer, because I was led into the office. Middle, I saw a huge stack of papers. After I have waited for minutes, a head emerged. Your name, demanded the head. Mickey. Father's name, Walt Disney. Mother's name, my mother? I don't have a mother. What? You don't have a mother? Don't fuck around with me. No, really, I don't have a mother. No kidding. I've known fellows who didn't have a father, but no mother? Never mind. You're a Jew. Pardon me? I'm asking you if you are a Jew. Shamefully, I confessed my complete ignorance on that subject. Have you been speculating illegally? Have you been dealing on the black market? Have you plotted against the security of the state? Have you entertained any subversive thoughts? Okay, what nationality are you? I was born in America, but I am international. Means you are a commie. And with a horrible grimace, the head disappeared back into its stack of papers. And it goes on and on and on with the most unbelievable satire that he enlists Mickey to tell you everything about what it means, an international Jew incarcerated in a camp. But I'm going to read you the last segment. Still, the air of the Pyrenees no longer suited me at all. Camp Gurs is in southern France next to the Pyrenees. So since I'm only a cartoon, I erased myself with a stroke of an eraser, and there we go. The police can always come and look for me in the land of liberté, égalité, et fraternité, which means in the land of liberty, equality, and fraternity. In parentheses, I'm talking about America. Well, he never made it. He had probably a dream to come over to this country. He never made it.